Richard Blackwood stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, surveying the city below like a modern-day emperor. At 45, he had built an empire worth $3 billion through ruthless business tactics, strategic acquisitions, and an unwavering belief that success belonged only to those born with superior intellect and breeding. His reflection in the glass showed a man impeccably dressed in a custom Italian suit, every detail of his appearance calculated to project power and dominance. "Mr. Blackwood," came a soft voice behind him. "Your breakfast is ready." Richard turned to see Maria Santos, his housekeeper of 3 years, standing respectfully near the dining area of his sprawling penthouse. At 52, Maria was a quiet woman from El Salvador who had immigrated to the United States 15 years earlier with dreams of providing a better life for her daughter. She worked 6 days a week, arriving at dawn and leaving after sunset, maintaining Richard's pristine lifestyle with meticulous care. "About time," Richard muttered, not bothering to acknowledge her properly as he strode to the dining table. "And, Maria, I've told you before, the newspapers should be ironed and arranged by section. This morning's Financial Times looks like it was handled by a child." Maria nodded silently. Though she had spent 20 minutes that morning carefully preparing his newspapers, exactly as he preferred. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood, I'll remember." As Richard ate his breakfast, organic free-range eggs, artisanal sourdough, toast, and Colombian coffee that cost more per pound than Maria made in a week, he scrolled through his phone, checking stock prices and reading updates about his various business ventures. Blackwood Industries dominated 3 major sectors: luxury real estate development, high-end technology consulting, and exclusive investment management. His success had made him arrogant, believing that his wealth was proof of his inherent superiority over others. "The coffee is cold," Richard announced without looking up from his phone. "How difficult is it to serve hot coffee?" Maria, who had served the coffee less than 2 minutes earlier, quietly took the cup to warm it again. She had learned long ago that arguing with Mr. Blackwood was pointless. He lived in a world where his word was absolute law, and everyone around him existed solely to serve his needs. "Mr. Blackwood," Maria said hesitantly as she returned with the reheated coffee, "I wanted to ask you about something." Richard looked up with visible irritation. "What is it?" "I have a board meeting in an hour." "Well, sir, I've been thinking about something that might help your business." The expression on Richard's face shifted from irritation to amusement, then to outright condescension. "You've been thinking about my business." He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing across his lips. "Maria, you clean toilets and dust furniture. What could you possibly know about running a multi-billion-dollar corporation?" Maria felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she pressed on. "I know it might sound strange, sir, but I've been watching how you work, and I've noticed something about your clients." "Oh, this should be rich." Richard chuckled, setting down his coffee cup. "Please, enlighten me with your profound business insights. Your clients are all very wealthy people." "Yes, but I've noticed that when they come here for meetings, they often talk about their children and grandchildren. They worry about them, about the world they're leaving behind." Richard's smile faded slightly. "Get to the point, Maria." "Well, sir, I was thinking, what if there was a way to help these wealthy families teach their children about money and responsibility? Not just giving them everything, but helping them learn to earn and appreciate what they have." Richard stared at her for a moment, then burst into laughter. "You want me to start a babysitting service for rich kids? Maria, this is exactly why you're a maid and I'm a billionaire. You have no understanding of how business works." "But sir, I think—" "No, Maria," Richard interrupted, standing up and straightening his tie. "You don't think. That's not what I pay you for. I pay you to clean, cook, and stay invisible. Leave the thinking to people who actually have brains." Maria's face flushed with hurt and anger, but she maintained her composure. "Yes, sir, I understand." "Good. Now clean up this mess and make sure my study is spotless before my meeting." "And Maria," Richard paused at the door, his voice dripping with condescension, "next time you have a business idea, keep it to yourself. I don't need financial advice from someone who probably doesn't even have a bank account." After Richard left for his office, Maria stood alone in the dining room, fighting back tears of humiliation. She had spent weeks observing his clients, listening to their conversations, and developing what she genuinely believed was a valuable idea. But to Richard, she was nothing more than an invisible servant whose thoughts and opinions were worthless. Later that morning, as Maria cleaned Richard's study, she couldn't help but notice the framed photographs on his desk. Richard shaking hands with politicians, receiving business awards, standing beside expensive cars and yachts. There were no family photos, no pictures of friends or loved ones. It was a shrine to his own success, but it seemed empty and cold. Her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter, Isabella, who was studying business administration at a community college while working part-time to help pay for her education. "How's work? Mama, did you talk to your boss about your idea?" Maria stared at the message, remembering her daughter's excitement when she had shared her business concept. Isabella had even helped her research similar programs and create a basic business plan. But now, after Richard's humiliating dismissal, Maria felt foolish for ever thinking her idea had merit. He wasn't interested. "Mia," she texted back. "Maybe it wasn't such a good idea after all." "Don't say that. Mama, your idea is brilliant. Maybe he's just not the right person to understand it." Maria smiled sadly at her daughter's unwavering support, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Richard was right. Who was she to think she could contribute to the business world? She was just a maid from El Salvador with a high school education and big dreams that would never come true. Meanwhile, Richard was in his corner office on the 47th floor of the Blackwood Industries building, preparing for his board meeting. The agenda included quarterly earnings reports, new acquisition targets, and strategic planning for the next fiscal year. As the CEO and majority shareholder, Richard commanded absolute authority in these meetings, and his board members rarely questioned his decisions. "Gentlemen," Richard announced as the meeting began, "our Q3 numbers are strong, but I want to discuss expansion opportunities." For the next 2 hours, the board reviewed various business proposals: a luxury resort development in the Bahamas, a tech startup acquisition, and several high-end real estate projects. Each proposal represented millions of dollars in potential revenue, but Richard found himself oddly distracted. "Sir," ventured James Morrison, the company's CFO, "you seem preoccupied. Is everything all right?" Richard realized he had been thinking about his conversation with Maria that morning, not because he thought her idea had merit, but because he was still amused by her audacity. "It's nothing important. Just had an amusing conversation with my housekeeper this morning. She thinks she has business ideas." The board members chuckled politely, understanding that this was meant to be humorous rather than serious. "What kind of ideas?" asked Patricia Wells, the head of marketing. "More out of politeness than genuine interest. She thinks I should start some kind of program to teach rich kids about money and responsibility," Richard said, still smiling at what he considered the absurdity of the suggestion. "Can you imagine a maid trying to give me business advice?" The laughter around the table was immediate and dismissive, but Richard noticed that Patricia didn't join in. Instead, she looked thoughtful. "Actually," Patricia said slowly, "that's not entirely without merit. There's been growing concern among our high-net-worth clients about their children's relationship with money. Many of them worry about raising entitled kids who don't understand the value of hard work." Richard's smile faded. "You're not seriously considering, I'm just saying it's a real concern in our target demographic." Patricia continued, "We've had several clients ask about resources for teaching financial responsibility to their children. There might be a market there." "Patricia, please tell me you're not taking seriously the ramblings of a woman who cleans toilets for a living." "I'm not saying we should implement her exact idea," Patricia clarified, "but the underlying concept, helping wealthy families instill values and financial literacy in their children, that could be valuable, especially if we positioned it as an exclusive high-end service." Richard felt a flicker of irritation. The idea that Maria might have stumbled onto something valuable was impossible to accept. "We're not in the business of babysitting, Patricia. We manage investments and develop properties." "Of course, sir, I was just making an observation." The meeting continued, but Richard found himself increasingly distracted. The thought that his maid, his uneducated immigrant maid, might have identified a business opportunity that he had missed was deeply unsettling. It challenged his fundamental belief in his own superiority and the natural order of things. That evening, Richard returned to his penthouse to find Maria preparing dinner. She worked quietly and efficiently, avoiding eye contact and speaking only when necessary. Her earlier enthusiasm had been replaced by subdued professionalism, and Richard felt a brief moment of something that might have been guilt. "Maria," he said as she served his dinner, "about this morning, ... It's okay, Mr. Blackwood. Maria replied quickly. I understand. I shouldn't have bothered you with such things. Right, Richard said, though he found her quick acceptance somehow unsatisfying. Just ... Stick to what you know. Yes, sir. As Maria retreated to the kitchen, Richard ate his dinner in silence, staring out at the glittering lights of Manhattan. He had built his empire by recognizing opportunities that others missed, by seeing potential where others saw only problems. The idea that he might have dismissed something valuable simply because of its source was troubling. But more troubling still was the growing realization that he knew almost nothing about the woman who had worked in his home for 3 years. He didn't know about her daughter's education, her dreams for the future, or the careful observations she had made about his business and clients. To him, she had always been invisible, a function rather than a person. That night, as Richard lay in his king-size bed in his master's suite, he couldn't shake the image of Maria's face when he had laughed at her idea. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning whether his success had come at the cost of his humanity, but such doubts were luxuries he couldn't afford. Tomorrow would bring new deals, new opportunities, and new confirmations of his superiority. Maria's idea was forgotten, dismissed as the foolish fantasy of someone who didn't understand how the real world worked. He had no idea that this dismissal would soon prove to be the most expensive mistake of his career. 3 months had passed since Richard's dismissive encounter with Maria's business idea, and life had returned to its predictable rhythm. Maria continued her duties with quiet efficiency, never again mentioning business or offering unsolicited advice. Richard had almost forgotten the incident entirely, focusing instead on a major acquisition deal that would expand Blackwood Industries into the European luxury market. It was a crisp October morning when Richard's carefully ordered world began to unravel. He was in his study, reviewing contracts for the European deal, when his assistant called with urgent news. Mr. Blackwood, came the voice of Jennifer Walsh, his executive assistant. You need to see the morning financial news. There's something about a new company that's making headlines. Jennifer, I don't have time for every startup that gets media attention. The Henderson deal closes today. Sir, this is different. The company is called Legacy Learning, and they're providing exactly the service your housekeeper suggested months ago. They're already valued at $50 million. Richard's pen stopped moving across the contract. What did you say? Legacy Learning. They work with ultra-high net worth families to teach financial responsibility and work ethic to their children. It's exactly what Maria suggested, and they've just secured funding from some of the biggest names in venture capital. Richard felt a cold sensation spreading through his chest. Send me everything you can find about this company. Now, within an hour, Richard's desk was covered with printouts, reports, and analysis about Legacy Learning. The company had been founded 6 months earlier by Dr. Sarah Chen, a former child psychologist, and Marcus Rodriguez, a financial advisor who had previously worked with family offices. Their approach was sophisticated and comprehensive. They created customized programs for wealthy families that combined financial education, character development, and real-world work experiences. The more Richard read, the more his discomfort grew. Legacy Learning's client list read like a who's who of American wealth: tech billionaires, old money families, entertainment moguls, and international business leaders. They charged premium fees $50,000 to $200,000 per family per year, and had a waiting list of over 300 families. This is impossible, Richard muttered, studying the company's marketing materials. The services they offered were sophisticated and well-designed, but the core concept was unmistakably similar to what Maria had suggested. His phone rang, interrupting his research. It was Patricia Wells from marketing. Richard, have you seen the news about Legacy Learning? I'm looking at it now. This is exactly what your housekeeper suggested 3 months ago. The market research shows there was enormous pent-up demand. For this type of service, we could have been first to market. Richard felt his jaw clench. Patricia, let's not get carried away. This is a completely different type of business than what Maria suggested. Is it though? I've been reading their case studies, and their approach is remarkably similar to what she described. They help wealthy parents teach their children about earning money, understanding its value, and developing work ethic. It's the same core concept. After ending the call, Richard sat in his office, staring at the Legacy Learning materials. The company's success story was already being featured in major business publications. Forbes had run a cover story titled "The Billion-Dollar Business of Teaching Rich Kids to Work." The Wall Street Journal had profiled several client families who credited the program with transforming their children's attitudes and behavior. One quote from a client particularly stung: "Legacy learning helped us solve a problem we didn't even know how to articulate. Our children were growing up entitled and disconnected from the value of money. This program gave them real-world experience and taught them that wealth comes with responsibility." Richard remembered Maria's words from months earlier. What if there was a way to help these wealthy families teach their children about money and responsibility? Not just giving them everything, but helping them learn to earn and appreciate what they have. The similarity was undeniable, and the financial implications were staggering. Legacy Learning's initial valuation of $50 million was conservative. Industry analysts were predicting the company could be worth over $1 billion within 5 years as they expanded internationally. That evening, Richard returned home to find Maria preparing dinner as usual. She worked quietly in the kitchen, seemingly unaware of the turmoil in his mind. For the first time in months, Richard really looked at her, not as an invisible servant, but as a person who had identified a multi-million-dollar business opportunity that he had dismissed. "Maria," he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Have you heard of a company called Legacy Learning?" Maria's hands paused in their work, and she turned to face him with a surprised expression. "Yes, sir. My daughter Isabella showed me an article about them last week. She said they were doing something similar to the idea I mentioned to you." "Similar? Maria, it's identical. They're doing exactly what you suggested." Maria's face showed a mixture of emotions: validation, sadness, and something that might have been regret. "I suppose great minds think alike, sir." "Maria, this company is worth $50 million. $50 million, and they're projecting exponential growth. That's wonderful for them, sir." Richard studied her face, searching for signs of bitterness or resentment, but found only quiet resignation. "Doesn't it bother you that someone else took your idea and became millionaires?" Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down, her cooking utensils, and faced him directly. "Mr. Blackwood, with respect, it wasn't really my idea. I'm sure many people have thought of similar things. I just thought it might help your clients with their children. But you saw the opportunity first. At least, you saw it before I did. Sir, I'm a housekeeper. I clean and cook. I don't run businesses or make millions of dollars. That's not my world." The simple acceptance in her voice made Richard feel worse, not better. But what if it could be your world? What if you had the resources, the connections, the capital? Maria smiled sadly. "What if is a dangerous game, Mr. Blackwood. I learned long ago that dreaming too big only leads to disappointment." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Maria's words, about the opportunity he had missed, and about the assumptions he had made. He had dismissed her idea not because it lacked merit, but because of who she was, or rather, who he thought she was. The next morning, Richard did something unprecedented. He asked Maria to sit down and tell him about herself. What he learned shocked him. Maria had been a teacher in El Salvador before immigrating to the United States. She had a degree in education and had taught elementary school for 8 years before economic circumstances forced her family to seek opportunities abroad. Her husband had died in an accident shortly after they arrived in the US, leaving her to raise their daughter alone. "I took cleaning jobs because my teaching credentials weren't recognized here, and I needed to work immediately," Maria explained. "But I never stopped observing, never stopped thinking about education and how children learn." "Your daughter is in college?" "Yes, sir. Isabella is studying business administration. She works part-time and takes out loans, but she's determined to graduate. She wants to start her own business someday." "What kind of business?" Maria hesitated, then said, "Actually, she's been developing a business plan based on the idea I mentioned to you. She thinks there might be a way to offer similar services to middle-class families, not just the wealthy." Richard felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "She's been working on this for months, sir. She's done market research, created financial projections, even reached out to potential partners. But we don't have the capital or connections to get started." "Maria, why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because you made it very clear that my ideas weren't welcome, sir." The truth of her words hit Richard like a physical blow. He had been so blinded by his own arrogance that he had failed to recognize the intelligence and insight of someone who worked in his home every day. Over the following weeks, Richard found himself paying closer attention to Maria's observations and insights. He began to realize that her perspective, as someone who moved between different social and economic worlds, gave her unique insights into human behavior and market opportunities. "Maria," he said one evening, "I want to make you an offer, sir. I want to invest in your daughter's business plan. I want to help you develop the idea you had months ago." Maria stared at him in shock. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand. I made a mistake." "Maria, a very expensive mistake. I let my prejudices blind me to a valuable opportunity. Legacy learning proved that your idea was worth millions, but that doesn't mean the market is saturated. There's room for competition, especially if we can offer something they don't." "But sir, I'm just a housekeeper." "No, Maria, you're an educator, a mother, an immigrant who has successfully navigated multiple cultures and economic systems. You're someone who sees opportunities that I miss, and I think it's time I started listening to what you have to say." For the first time since he had known her, Maria's composure cracked. Tears filled her eyes as she struggled to process what he was offering. "Are you serious, Mr. Blackwood?" "Completely serious. I want to be your business partner, Maria. I'll provide the capital and connections. You provide the vision and expertise. We'll build something that makes legacy learning look like a small-time operation." As Maria wiped away her tears, Richard felt something he hadn't experienced in years: excitement about a business venture that was about more than just making money. For the first time, he was going to build something that actually helped people. He had no idea that this decision would not only make him millions overnight, but would also fundamentally change his understanding of success, value, and what it meant to be truly wealthy. 6 months after Richard's life-changing conversation with Maria, the conference room on the 47th floor of Blackwood Industries buzzed with an energy that Richard had never experienced before. The mahogany table was covered with business plans, market research, and prototype materials for their new venture, Heritage Academy, a comprehensive family education program that would revolutionize how wealthy families approach child development and financial literacy. "The preliminary numbers are extraordinary," announced Patricia Wells, now serving as Chief Marketing Officer for the new division. "We have 127 families on our waiting list, and we haven't even officially launched yet." Richard looked across the table at Maria, who sat confidently in a tailored business suit, her transformation from housekeeper to co-founder still remarkable to witness. Beside her sat Isabella, now 22, and serving as the company's director of program development, her business degree finally put to use in ways she had only dreamed of. "The key differentiator," Isabella explained to the assembled team, "is our multi-generational approach. While legacy learning focuses primarily on the children, Heritage Academy works with entire family systems, grandparents, parents, children, and even family staff." Maria nodded, adding, "We realize that sustainable change requires everyone in the family ecosystem to understand and support the values being taught. It's not enough to send a child to a program if they return to an environment that undermines those lessons." Dr. James Harrison, the child psychologist they had recruited from Harvard, leaned forward with enthusiasm. "The research supports this approach completely. Family systems theory shows that lasting behavioral change requires environmental consistency. Heritage Academy's model is revolutionary in its comprehensiveness." Richard felt a surge of pride as he watched Maria command the room with quiet authority. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Once she was given the platform and resources to develop her ideas, her natural intelligence and educational background had flourished. She had thrown herself into business education, working with consultants to understand finance, marketing, and operations while never losing sight of the core mission that had inspired her original idea. "Let's review the service offerings," Richard said, pulling up the presentation on the large screen. "Maria, would you walk us through the program structure?" Maria stood and moved to the front of the room with confidence that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. Heritage Academy offers 3 tiers of service, each designed for different family needs and commitment levels. She clicked to the first slide. "Our foundation program is a 6-month engagement that includes family assessment, customized curriculum development, and monthly progress reviews. This serves families who want to establish basic financial literacy and work ethic principles. The investment is $75,000 per family. The transformation program, Isabella continued, taking over the presentation, is our flagship offering. It's a 2-year comprehensive engagement that includes everything in the foundation program, plus immersive experiences, mentorship matching, and ongoing family coaching. The investment is $200,000 per family, and our legacy program, Maria concluded, is for families who want to create multi-generational change. This is a 5-year partnership that includes all previous services, plus estate planning integration, family governance development, and preparation for philanthropic leadership. The investment is $500,000 per family. The room was silent for a moment as the team absorbed the scope and scale of what they had built. The waiting list breakdown is particularly encouraging, added Jennifer Walsh, who had transitioned from Richard's assistant to Heritage Academy's operations director. 43 families have requested the legacy program, 62 want the transformation program, and 22 are interested in the foundation program. Richard did quick mental math. That's over $40 million in committed revenue before we've even launched. Actually, Maria said with a smile, it's $43.7 million, to be precise. The precision of her answer reminded Richard of how much Maria had learned and grown. She now understood every aspect of the business as well as he did, often better. The real breakthrough, Dr. Harrison added, came when we realized that many of these families' problems weren't just about money. They were about purpose, meaning, and connection. Heritage Academy doesn't just teach financial responsibility, it helps families rediscover their values and create shared missions. Richard remembered the moment when this insight had emerged. It had been during a planning session 3 months earlier when Maria had quietly observed, money is just a tool. These families have plenty of tools. What they're missing is a blueprint for building something meaningful. That observation had led to Heritage Academy's most innovative feature, the Family Legacy Project. Each participating family worked with the Heritage Academy team to identify a cause or mission that aligned with their values, then developed a multi-generational plan to make a meaningful impact in that area. The Pemberton family is a perfect example, Isabella said, pulling up a case study. They came to us because their teenage son was completely unmotivated, and their daughter was struggling with anxiety about her privileged position. Through the Legacy Project, they discovered a shared passion for environmental conservation. Now, Maria continued, the entire family is working together to establish a foundation focused on ocean cleanup. The children are learning business skills by helping to run the foundation. They're developing work ethic through hands-on environmental projects, and they're finding purpose by contributing to something larger than themselves. The psychological transformation has been remarkable, Dr. Harrison added. The son went from being a C student with no direction to being accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship that he earned through his environmental work. The daughter's anxiety has virtually disappeared as she's found her voice as a young environmental advocate. Richard shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, I would have said this was impossible. Families don't change that dramatically. They do when they have the right support and structure, Maria replied, and when someone believes in their potential for growth. The comment carried weight beyond its business context, and Richard understood the deeper meaning. Maria was describing not just their client's transformation, but her own, and perhaps his as well. Let's talk about the financial projections, said Marcus Webb, their newly hired CFO. Based on current demand and our planned expansion, we're projecting first-year revenue of $65 million. Second year, Richard asked. $140 million, assuming we expand to serve families internationally. And by year 5, Marcus smiled. Conservative estimates put us at $400 million annually. Aggressive projections suggest we could reach $800 million if we successfully launch in Europe and Asia. The numbers were staggering, but Richard found himself more excited about the impact metrics that Isabella had developed. We're tracking more than just financial success, Isabella explained. We measure family satisfaction, child academic performance, volunteer hours contributed, and long-term behavioral changes. The early results are extraordinary. 94% of participating families report improved communication and stronger relationships, Maria added. 87% of children shown measurable improvements in academic performance, and 100% of families have initiated some form of philanthropic activity. But the most important metric, Isabella continued, is what we call purpose, clarity. Before Heritage Academy, only 12% of the children in our program could articulate a clear sense of personal mission or values. After 6 months, that number rises to 89%. Richard leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed by what they had accomplished. "Maria, do you realize what you've created here?" "We've created it," Maria corrected gently. "This couldn't have happened without your resources, connections, and business expertise. But the vision was yours. The insight was yours. I just provided the platform, and I provided the idea. But ideas without execution are just dreams. It took both of us to make this real." As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed, Richard found himself alone with Maria in the conference room. The Manhattan skyline stretched out before them, the same view he had enjoyed for years, but which now seemed different somehow. "Maria," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "Mr. Blackwood, Richard, please, we're partners now." "Richard," she said, testing out his first name, "you don't owe me an apology. You gave me an opportunity that changed my life and my daughter's life forever, but I almost didn't. I almost let my arrogance and prejudice cost both of us millions of dollars and the chance to build something meaningful." Maria was quiet for a moment, then said, "I think everything happened exactly as it was supposed to. If you had immediately embraced my idea, you might have tried to control it completely. The fact that you dismissed it first, then came back to it after seeing Legacy Learning's success, meant that when we finally partnered, you were ready to truly listen and collaborate." Richard considered this perspective. "You think my initial rejection was necessary? I think it taught both of us important lessons. You learned that good ideas can come from anywhere, and I learned that I had valuable insights worth fighting for. And now we're building something that will help families for generations. We're proving that business success and social impact aren't mutually exclusive, and we're showing that the best partnerships come from combining different perspectives and experiences." 6 months later, Heritage Academy was featured on the cover of Fortune magazine with the headline, "The Maid's $1 Million Idea: How a Housekeeper Became a Business Mogul." The article detailed Maria's transformation from domestic worker to successful entrepreneur, but it also explored Richard's evolution from dismissive billionaire to collaborative partner. The most successful business leaders, the article quoted Richard as saying, "are those who can recognize good ideas regardless of their source. I almost missed the opportunity of a lifetime because I let my assumptions blind me to the wisdom of someone who saw what I couldn't see." Maria's quote in the same article was equally revealing. "Success isn't about where you start. It's about being willing to learn, grow, and take risks when opportunities present themselves." Heritage Academy exists because two people from very different backgrounds were willing to combine their strengths. The business continued to grow exponentially. By the end of their second year, Heritage Academy had served over 300 families across North America and had begun expanding internationally. Maria had become a sought-after speaker on entrepreneurship and family dynamics, while Richard had discovered a passion for mentoring other unlikely business partnerships. But perhaps the most significant change was in Richard himself. The man, who had once measured success purely in financial terms, now found meaning in the transformation stories of the families they served. He had learned that true wealth wasn't just about accumulating money, it was about creating value that lasted beyond his own lifetime. "You know what the best part is?" Richard said to Maria one evening as they reviewed applications from families wanting to join Heritage Academy. "What's that? Every family we help becomes a multiplier. They take what they learn and share it with other families, other children. We're not just building a business, we're starting a movement." Maria smiled, remembering the scared housekeeper who had hesitantly suggested an idea to her dismissive employer just 2 years earlier. "Sometimes the smallest seeds grow into the biggest trees, and sometimes," Richard replied, "the most valuable lessons come from the people we least expect to teach us." As they worked late into the evening, planning the next phase of Heritage Academy's expansion, both Richard and Maria understood that they had created something far more valuable than a successful business. They had proven that when people are willing to look beyond their assumptions and prejudices, when they're open to learning from unexpected sources, and when they combine their unique strengths in service of a meaningful mission, they can create success that transforms not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. The Maid's idea had indeed made Richard millions overnight, but more importantly, it had made both of them better people. Legal disclaimer: this story is completely fictional and was created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.